How come no one ever wants to play in a band with me? Because you don't work on your rhythm. How come nothing I play sounds like the record? Because you don't work on your rhythm. How come my parents' love always felt superficial? Because you don't work on your... You know, to be honest, it's probably because you didn't work on your rhythm. What's the biggest thing that separates the pros from the amateurs? The pros dedicate themselves to mastering the art of rhythm guitar. Here are 10 things they do that you aren't. Let's start with the right hand. Everyone knows that the picking hand is where the bulk of the rhythm magic happens, but here are some specific things you can start doing right now with your strumming appendage. First of all, syncing up the right arm with the quarter note. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm amazed at how many guitar players don't do this. But the right arm should be like a pendulum swinging in time to the music. Even when you're not playing, it maintains that motion. And by doing this, you're never thinking about downstrokes or upstrokes. You're just thinking about whether or not you're hitting the strings. Pretty much every time I'm doing chordal-based stuff, that perpetual motion is engaged somewhere in my arm. From bluegrass style strumming to tighter electric style stuff. Besides that, keeping the arm relaxed, thinking about how hard I'm hitting the strings in different places, hitting the chord in different places. Things like this can bring so much life into something as simple as one open chord. Now, if at any point today you're thinking, man, I wish Sammy G would go into more detail about that, well, good news for you. All these things that we're talking about make up full videos in my new course, Into the Rhythm. And through this course, we go step by step through the things that will take your rhythm playing to the next level. If you take any course of mine, take this one. This is the stuff that truly makes all the difference. And today is your last chance to sign up. And if you do so, using the link in the description, you're gonna get a whopping 50% off. Anyways, let's get back to it. You know how Guitar George knows all the chords? It's essential to know your guitar neck and know how to play something like a C major all across it. But equally important is knowing how to pick the best chordal choices from all those options for certain scenarios. Step one is just thinking about why you're picking one chord over the next chord. And even if you don't have the answer yet, just asking the question sets you on that path. Step two is experimenting and analyzing. If you're supposed to play this C over this one here, and you think it sounds better, you ask yourself, well, why does it sound better? Is it because the chord is lower on the neck and fills up more sonic space, which is valuable when you're playing in a smaller ensemble? Or is it because the other guitar player in your band is playing this inversion? And by playing the lower voicing, it means you're not playing the exact same notes as him, and by playing these two things together, it creates a nice effect. Strategically picking chord voicings honestly adds so much to a part. On a related note, understanding how the chords and a melody work together is highly valuable information. So say, for example, I have a song and the melody goes, and the chord underneath is our good old trusty C major. Being able to play both of those things together like this means that if the singer is singing that melody and you're playing that part, these two things are fitting together really nicely. If you know how the melody works and you can tie it into your rhythm guitar parts, you can create such a more engaged and supportive part. Or you can start doing chord substitutions, which are a great tool for spicing things up. I know this melody works with a C chord, but having analyzed it, I know that it could also work with an F and sound like this. Knowing how a melody and chords work together is a way that professionals open up so many options. There's this concept you come across over and over again in all types of music, call and response, and by implementing this, it can add so much to your rhythm parts. And what this is bringing in an element of language into your music. One voice says something, another voice responds. Listen to how I fill in the gaps in the vocal lines with what I do on my guitar. I'm singing this song about whatever, yeah, 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 come on. The lyrics, they don't matter. Just wanna demonstrate call and response. As a rhythm player, if you sometimes punctuate the gaps in what the lead vocal or main sound source is doing, it brings this natural conversational element of life into the song. Let's talk about a couple mistakes people tend to make with their gear and their tone. You want your guitar tone to sound big, loud, and angry. What do? You grab your distortion pedal and crank the gain all the way up. But the trade-off when you do this is that the distortion overtakes your guitar sound and you lose some of the subtleties in the rhythm and your playing. It becomes a big distorted mess. As well, dialing down the distortion a little bit bit can leave space in the mix for other instruments to cut through. And when you're thinking about your sound, not just as you, but as your entire band, this can be very valuable in making things sound as loud and big as possible. But say you're not using a distortion pedal, but rather the distortion sound that comes from your amp. Well, here's a mistake that a lot of people end up making. If you're running something like a reverb pedal or delay into that distortion, everything can end up sounding really murky. That's because you want to take your distorted signal and then run that into the delay or reverb. You flip it around and things get messy. So how do we fix this? Well, chances are on the back of your amp, there's this thing called an effects loop. You run a cable out of there into your reverb pedal and then back into the other side of the loop. And this is a little part of the circuitry that allows you to add these effects after the amp distortion. The last thing that's really going to help your rhythm guitar playing that a lot of people get wrong is the way that they use their tone knob. Turn it all the way up, never touch it again. But if you always have an ear on how your guitar is blending with the rest of the band, this can be very valuable to you. If you feel like you're standing out a little bit too much and you want to have more of a background supportive role, it's not always about just turning down your volume, but by darkening your sound, you can get that same effect with a bit of a different technique. Or say there's a part where everybody else is out except for me, I might consider turning down my high end a little bit, giving me that rich, dark flavor that otherwise would have got drowned out if I was trying to compete with cymbals and stuff. The easiest way to step up everything you do on guitar, especially the rhythm side of things, is by becoming best friends with this guy right here, the metronome. If there's one thing you take from this video, let it be this. Whatever you're working on, incorporate the metronome. But beyond that, there are a couple things you can do with this tool that will really help elevate your time feel. First of all, the default with this tool is to set it so that it's beating on every beat 1, 2, 3, 4. That would sound like this. However, if you set it so that it triggers half as fast and play with it so that those beats are falling on the second and fourth beat of the bar, it gives it a sense of groove. It's almost as if this is fulfilling the role of a snare drum in the song. And when you have those longer spaces in between the beats, it forces you to rely on your inner time feel, which is what we're trying to train anyway. Let's hear how that might sound. The metronome, it wants to be friends with you. Let it into your life. So you've taken my course on rhythm guitar, you've taken all these tips to heart, but unfortunately, music is rarely a single person operation. You gotta approach this concept as a band. And there's a few things I would encourage not just you to think about, but things that your entire rhythm section can implement. For example, say you have a solo section that's feeling a little bit stale. Well, instead of just everybody hammering out their parts, what if you arranged it so that the band was catching a number of shots throughout? Or if the time feel starts to fluctuate, does everybody know that you divert back to the drummer to get everything back on track? Have you considered incorporating a metronome? See last tip. You could use it when you're performing, everyone has it in their in-ears, or maybe just when you're practicing, it's coming through the PA, or maybe just the drummer uses it to make sure when he counts in the song, it's at the same time every time. You can only do so much on your own, but if you have the entire rhythm section locked in, it's going to do great things. It's by no means a hot take to say that Jimi Hendrix is one of the most important guitar players that ever lived. But even if you're not a huge fan of his music, I'd encourage you to spend some time understanding his rhythmic style. See, so much of what Jimi Hendrix did still echoes throughout the entire guitar ecosystem now. And by understanding his rhythmic stylings, you have a tool that works in so many different musical settings. If you want to play like Stevie Ray Vaughan, John Frusciante, John Mayer, anybody who's influenced by those guys, it all has its root in Hendrix. So pick a Hendrix tune, learn some rhythmic riffs from it, and try to incorporate it in different places. And the funny thing is, the more you do this, the more you end up hearing the Hendrix influence all over the place. The easiest way to impress the masses and win over the heart of the one you desire is through finger picking. Did I win you over? See, the cool thing about playing like this is it sounds like you're doing three things at the same time. You're essentially fulfilling three different roles. You have the bass part, you have the chord, and then you have the melody on top. It's actually not that hard to get this stuff under your hands if you learn like this. First of all, either use a tab to write out your part or refer to a tab of something someone else played. What you want to do is really break this down into small manageable parts, starting with one beat at a time. In our example, our first beat is simply, if we then add the second beat, which is this, if I repeat those two things together now, starting to come together a little bit. My next two beats are this. If I put everything together now, I get. If If you break things down to slow, manageable parts like this, it becomes easy to digest. And then you gradually add on one more beat, a little bit more, and before long, you're going to be finger picking like a pro. It's another tool that adds a lot to a rhythm part, and it's great to pull out now and then. Now, with a lot of these tips, we're just kind of glossing over them today. The point is to give you an introduction to some things that you might incorporate in your own playing. If you want a deeper study, my new course, Into the Rhythm, goes through all these things and more in much more detail. Today is the last day that you can enroll for that, and use the link in the description to save 50%. Anyway, on to our last tip. Thinking about your guitar like a bass player. One of the core pieces of information that's always running through my musical thought process is what's happening in the lower end. What are the root notes doing? And so if I have a chord progression that's going from a G major to C major, I'm thinking about the relationship between the G and the C, and I might also think about tying these two chords together like a bass player might, which would sound like this. And I find connecting chords like this adds such an engaging component to a rhythm part. There are a lot of ways you can start incorporating this, and if your bass player is also catching some of these same lines, it creates a really engaging and connected part. Ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. Those are the things the pros are doing that you aren't. Those are the reasons why they're getting hired. Those are the reasons why everyone wants to play with them. And remember, if you do want to go deeper into any of these things, today is the last day that you can sign up for my new course, Into the Rhythm, and if you do so using the link in the description, you're going to get an extra 50% off. And I should also mention the merch store is getting cleared out, so if you want to get any of the classic designs like the Silhouette Samurai Guitarist, do so now. You can find that at shopsamuraiguitarist.com. Thank you all for watching. Until next time, look after yourselves, look after each other, look after the planet. I'm Samurai Guitarist, and I'll see you again soon.